Genesis 39. The Ishmaelites took Joseph to Egypt and sold him to Potiphar, the king's official in charge of the palace guard. So Joseph lived in the home of Potiphar, his Egyptian owner. Soon Potiphar realized that the Lord was helping Joseph to be successful in whatever he did. Potiphar liked Joseph and made him his personal assistant, putting him in charge of his house and all of his property. Because of Joseph, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's family and fields. Potiphar left everything up to Joseph, and with Joseph there, the only decision he had to make was what he wanted to eat. Joseph was well-built and handsome, and Potiphar's wife soon noticed him. She asked him to make love to her, but he refused and said,
"My master isn't worried about anything in his house because he has placed me in charge of everything he owns. No one in my master's house is more important than I am. The only thing he hasn't given me is you, and that's because you are his wife. I won't sin against God by doing such a terrible thing as this."
She kept begging Joseph day after day, but he refused to do what she wanted or even to go near her. One day, Joseph went to Potiphar's house to do his work, and none of the other servants were there. Potiphar's wife grabbed hold of his coat and said,
"Make love to me."
Joseph ran out of the house, leaving her hanging onto his coat. When this happened, she called in her servants and said,
"Look, this Hebrew has come just to make fools of us. He tried to rape me, but I screamed for help, and when he heard me scream, he ran out of the house, leaving his coat with me."
Potiphar's wife kept Joseph's coat until her husband came home. Then she said,
"That Hebrew slave of yours tried to rape me, but when I screamed for help, he left his coat and ran out of the house."
Potiphar became very angry and threw Joseph in the same prison where the king's prisoners were kept. While Joseph was in prison, the Lord helped him and was good to him. He even made the jailer like Joseph so much that he put him in charge of the other prisoners and of everything that was done in the jail. The jailer did not worry about anything because the Lord was with Joseph and made him successful in all that he did. Genesis 40. While Joseph was in prison, both the king's personal servant and his chief cook made the king angry, so he had them thrown into the same prison with Joseph. They spent a long time in prison, and Potiphar, the official in charge of the palace guard, made Joseph their servant. One night, each of the two men had a dream, but their dreams had different meanings. The next morning, when Joseph went to see the men, he could tell they were upset, and he asked,
"Why are you so worried today?"
"We each had a dream last night,"
they answered.
"and there's no one to tell us what they mean."
Joseph replied,
"Doesn't God know the meaning of dreams? Now, tell me what you dreamed."
The king's personal servant told Joseph,
"In my dream, I saw a vine with 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its grapes became ripe. I held the king's cup and squeezed the grapes into it. Then I gave the cup to the king."
Joseph said,
"This is the meaning of your dream. The 3 branches stand for 3 days, and in 3 days the king will pardon you. He will make you his personal servant again, and you will serve him his wine just as you used to do. But when these good things happen, please don't forget to tell the king about me so I can get out of this place. I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews, and here in Egypt I haven't done anything to deserve being thrown in jail."
When the chief cook saw that Joseph had given a good meaning to the dream, he told Joseph,
"I also had a dream. In it, I was carrying 3 bread baskets stacked on top of my head. The top basket was full of all kinds of baked things for the king, but birds were eating them."
Joseph said,
"This is the meaning of your dream. The 3 baskets are 3 days, and in 3 days the king will cut off your head. He will hang your body on a pole, and birds will come and peck at it."
3 days later, while the king was celebrating his birthday with a dinner for his officials, he sent for his personal servant and the chief cook. He put the personal servant back in his old job and had the cook put to death. Everything happened just as Joseph had said it would, but the king's personal servant completely forgot about Joseph. Genesis 41. 2 years later, the king of Egypt dreamed he was standing beside the Nile River. Suddenly, 7 fat, healthy cows came up from the river and started eating grass along the bank. Then 7 ugly, skinny cows came up out of the river and ate the fat, healthy cows. When this happened, the king woke up. The king went back to sleep and had another dream. This time, 7 full heads of grain were growing on a single stalk. Later, 7 other heads of grain appeared, but they were thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed the 7 full heads. Again the king woke up, and it had only been a dream. The next morning the king was upset, so he called in his magicians and wise men and told them what he had dreamed. None of them could tell him what the dreams meant. The king's personal servant said,
Now I remember what I was supposed to do. When you were angry with me and your chief cook, you threw us both in jail in the house of the captain of the guard. One night we both had dreams, and each dream had a different meaning. A young Hebrew, who was a servant of the captain of the guard, was there with us at the time. When we told him our dreams, he explained what each of them meant, and everything happened just as he said it would. I got my job back, and the cook was put to death.
The king sent for Joseph, who was quickly brought out of jail. He shaved, changed his clothes, and went to the king. The king said to him,
I had a dream, yet no one can explain what it means. I am told that you can interpret dreams.
Your Majesty,
Joseph answered,
I can't do it myself, but God can give a good meaning to your dreams.
The king told Joseph,
I dreamed I was standing on the bank of the Nile River. I saw 7 fat, healthy cows come up out of the river. They began feeding on the grass. Next, 7 skinny, bony cows came up out of the river. I have never seen such terrible-looking cows anywhere in Egypt. The skinny cows ate the fat ones, but you couldn't tell it because these skinny cows were just as skinny as they were before. Right away, I woke up. I also dreamed that I saw 7 heads of grain growing on one stalk. The heads were full and ripe. Then 7 other heads of grain came up. They were thin and scorched by a wind from the desert. These heads of grain swallowed the full ones. I told my dreams to the magicians, but none of them could tell me the meaning of the dreams.
Joseph replied,
Your Majesty, both of your dreams mean the same thing, and in them God has shown what he is going to do. The 7 good cows stand for 7 years, and so do the 7 good heads of grain. The 7 skinny, ugly cows that came up later also stand for 7 years, as do the 7 bad heads of grain that were scorched by the east wind. The dreams mean there will be 7 years when there won't be enough grain. It is just as I said. God has shown what he intends to do. For 7 years, Egypt will have more than enough grain, but that will be followed by 7 years when there won't be enough. The good years of plenty will be forgotten, and everywhere in Egypt, people will be starving. The famine will be so bad that no one will remember that once there had been plenty. God has given you 2 dreams to let you know that he has definitely decided to do this, and that he will do it soon. Your Majesty, you should find someone who is wise and will know what to do, so that you can put him in charge of all Egypt. Then appoint some other officials to collect 1/5 of every crop harvested in Egypt during the 7 years when there is plenty. Give them the power to collect the grain during those good years and to store it in your cities. It can be stored until it is needed during the 7 years when there won't be enough grain in Egypt. This will keep the country from being destroyed because of the lack of food.
The king and his officials liked this plan. So the king said to them,
No one could possibly handle this better than Joseph, since the Spirit of God is with him.
The king told Joseph,
God is the only one who has shown you these things. No one else is as wise as you are or knows as much as you do. I'm putting you in charge of my palace, and everybody will have to obey you. No one will be over you except me. You are now governor of all Egypt."
Then the king took off his royal ring and put it on Joseph's finger. He gave him fine clothes to wear and placed a gold chain around his neck. He also let him ride in the chariot next to his own, and people shouted,
"Make way for Joseph!"
So Joseph was governor of Egypt. The king told Joseph,
"Although I'm king, no one in Egypt is to do anything without your permission."
He gave Joseph the Egyptian name Zaphanath-Paneah, and he let him marry Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, a priest in the city of Heliopolis. Joseph traveled all over Egypt. Joseph was 30 when the king made him governor, and he went everywhere for the king. For 7 years there were big harvests of grain. Joseph collected and stored up the extra grain in the cities of Egypt near the fields where it was harvested. In fact, there was so much grain that they stopped keeping record, because it was like counting the grains of sand along the beach. Joseph and his wife had 2 sons before the famine began. Their first son was named Manasseh, which means,
God has let me forget all my troubles and my family back home.
His second son was named Ephraim, which means,
God has made me a success in the land where I suffered.
Egypt's 7 years of plenty came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was not enough food in other countries, but all over Egypt there was plenty. When the famine finally struck Egypt, the people asked the king for food, but he said,
"Go to Joseph and do what he tells you to do."
The famine became bad everywhere in Egypt. So Joseph opened the storehouses and sold the grain to the Egyptians. People from all over the world came to Egypt because the famine was severe in their countries.